Welcome, seeker of mysteries, to a journey that will guide you into the twilight realms where legend and history meet. Tonight, let us drift beyond the borders of ordinary knowledge, into the silent forests where the wild man is said to walk, and across the shadowed waters where the Loch Ness Monster may rise. These are not simply tales of beasts, but echoes of mankind's deepest fears and wonders, stories woven through centuries, carried by the voices of countless generations. Close your eyes and imagine a footprint pressed in fresh earth, larger than any human stride, a ripple disturbing a glassy lake at midnight, too vast to be caused by wind. Are these signs of living creatures hiding from the world? Or are they mirrors of the mysteries within us? Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Yeti, Nessie, each has become a timeless companion to human imagination, so let us wander together through the forests of myth and the waters of legend, seeking not proof, but wonder. For in these shadows, you may discover more than monsters, you may discover reflections of the human spirit itself. Settle in, let the words flow like a lullaby, and enter the realm of cryptids eternal. Long before the maps of men were drawn, when forests were endless and waters stretched into horizons unmeasured, the world was said to echo with the tread of beings both half-seen and half-remembered. Legends tell not only of gods and spirits, but also of creatures who walked beside humankind in the shadowed places, beings neither fully beast nor wholly myth, whose presence lingered like mist across the ages. Of these, two names endure above all: the giant wanderer of the forests, whom some have called Bigfoot, and the dark guardian of the waters, whispered of as the Loch Ness Monster. The chronicles of old do not call them by such names, yet the essence is the same. Across continents and centuries, tales converge upon shapes familiar yet elusive, as though carved from the same hidden stone of memory. In the highlands of the north, where lochs sleep beneath veils of mist, fishermen whispered of a long-necked serpent rising from the black waters. In the forests of the west, where pines stretch endless as pillars of an ancient temple, hunters spoke of a towering shape, hair-clad, massive, striding silently where no man could walk. These were not isolated murmurs, but patterns woven into the fabric of cultures separated by oceans and by centuries. To understand the enigma of cryptids is to walk into the boundary between myth and memory, where history blurs with dream. For in every land there are stories of the wild man, the water beast, the serpent of the deep, the hairy wanderer, the silent guardian of mountains and lakes. These beings are older than nations, older than written words, and their presence clings to the oldest stones and darkest woods. Among the chronicles of the Mesopotamians there lingers the tale of Enkidu, a wild man born of clay and grass, who roamed the wilderness before being drawn into the cities of men. Though cast as myth, his image is the same as that later called Bigfoot, untamed, vast, half-human yet beyond the reach of law. In the Celtic Isles, bards sang of water serpents inhabiting lochs, their coils disturbing the surface only at dawn or dusk. In Norse sagas, the Midgard serpent was said to circle the earth in hidden waters, surfacing in times of omen. What modern minds call cryptids were, for the ancients, reminders of the old order, when man was not yet sovereign, and the world still breathed with beasts that bore mystery as their skin. The American wilderness holds whispers of the Sasquatch, its name drawn from Salish tongues, where tribes spoke of a towering forest dweller, not beast to be hunted but guardian of the woods. To these people, the being was not a monster but a presence older than their own. It walked the line between spirit and flesh, keeper of balance, feared yet revered. In the Scottish Highlands, the monster of Loch Ness was never first a tourist tale, but an ancient fear in Celtic lore, where waters hid dark serpents known as each witch, water horses that dragged the unwary into drowning depths. Beneath these varied names lies a single thread, humanity's encounter with that which cannot be measured or confined. It is told that when forests stretched unbroken from horizon to horizon, the wild man moved unseen, following rivers and hunting silently under moonlight. His footprint pressed into the earth larger than any man's, a sign of strength beyond reckoning. His cry was said to echo across valleys, neither animal nor human, a lament of the old wilderness fading. When rivers were wider, when lochs were deeper, the water beasts stirred more often, their serpentine backs rising like islands only to vanish into black depths again. With the shrinking of wilderness, so too did these visions retreat, yet their memory clung to human hearts like the smoke of an old fire. Scholars of the past wrote not with certainty but with awe. Medieval chroniclers spoke of homines sylvestres, wild men covered in hair, dwelling on the edges of Christendom, embodiments of the unknown. Travelers to the east described ape-like giants in mountain passes, footprints too vast to be ignored. Monks recording visions of lochs and rivers told of serpents that swallowed cattle whole, beasts whose coils churned waters into storms. To them, these were not curiosities but warnings, that the wilderness itself harbored forces untamed, reminders that man was never truly alone in creation. Legends of the wild man are as old as humanity itself. In Mesopotamian reliefs, one sees figures half man, half beast, grasping lions with effortless strength. In medieval Europe, tapestries show hairy giants carrying clubs, feared but also honored as symbols of raw nature. In the Himalayas, the Yeti stalks the snows, cousin to the Bigfoot of American woods, both part of a lineage of memory that stretches across cultures. The water beasts, too, are not confined to Scotland. From Lake Champlain in North America to the seas of Japan where yumabozu rise from waves, every culture has its monster of the deep, a shadow moving just beyond reach of reason. The enigma lies not merely in sightings, but in persistence. Why do these tales return, century after century, continent after continent, like echoes across time? It is as if humanity cannot escape the memory of beings larger than itself, guardians of the edges where light fades into shadow. Whether flesh or spirit, their stories remind us that not all of the world has been mapped, not all waters sounded, not all forests tamed. Thus part 1 closes with the veil half lifted. The wild man roams the forests of memory, the water beast coils in the lochs of legend. Their presence is neither proven nor dismissed, but endures like constellations that vanish in daylight only to return at night. And so the story of cryptids begins, not with certainty, but with mystery, with the haunting persistence of shadows too vast to be denied. From the first whispers of dawn in humanity's memory, the figure of the wild man has lingered, not as passing fancy but as a constant presence in the chronicles of countless cultures. He is the elder shadow of mankind, striding in silence at the borders of habitation, appearing in visions and in tales whenever men dared to test the wilderness. Though his names are many, Sasquatch among the tribes of the Pacific Northwest, Yeti among Himalayan heights, Almasty in the Russian steppes, Orang Pendek in the Sumatran jungles, the essence remains, a creature both man and more than man. Clothed not in cloth but in the shaggy mantle of the earth itself. In Mesopotamian epics he was Enkidu, who wandered with the beasts until drawn reluctantly into the circle of human order. In European medieval texts he was the Homo sylvestris, feared as a savage yet respected as a symbol of primal strength. In the sagas of the Norse, there were giants who lived in wild places, embodiments of raw and untamed nature. In each tradition, the wild man was not wholly monster but a mirror of humankind's forgotten kinship with the raw world, a reminder that before the shaping of kingdoms, men too were wanderers beneath the open sky. The persistence of such images is not accident. Anthropologists uncover cave paintings where tall, broad forms loom beside deer and bison, drawn with reverence or fear. Ancient petroglyphs in the Americas depict towering figures with outstretched arms, eyes wide, footprints exaggerated as if to warn, this place belongs not to man alone. The storytellers of the tribes carried the memory further, speaking of creatures that could vanish into trees without sound, who watched but seldom harmed, who carried the wisdom of the woods in silence. It is said that the wild man is never truly seen, only glimpsed. Hunters speak of footprints that vanish abruptly, as if the being stepped into another realm. Travelers described shadows crossing ridgelines at twilight, forms too tall and fluid to be bear or elk. Sometimes there are cries, deep and resonant, echoing across valleys like the lament of mountains themselves. Always, the wild man is felt as much as seen, a presence at the edge of vision, stirring unease yet awe. Historians of later ages sought to rationalize. Some claim the tales arose from encounters with apes carried by ancient travelers, memories that exaggerated into myth. Others said the wild man was metaphor, an embodiment of wilderness untamed. Yet the stories refuse to be contained by explanation, for they appear wherever men dwell at the edge of vast forests, repeating with uncanny similarity across tongues and continents. How could tribes separated by oceans speak of the same figure, tall, hairy, secretive, striding in silence through the dark? Perhaps the truth is older than the divisions of mankind. The ancient world teemed with beings now vanished, giant apes like Gigantopithecus, standing higher than any man. Fossil bones whisper that such creatures once walked the earth, and if they lingered longer than science admits, perhaps memory has preserved their image in story. Yet whether fossil or spirit, the wild man's endurance in legend speaks of something more than bones. It speaks of longing for connection to a world less tamed, where the line between human and wilderness was not yet sealed. For every tale of terror, there are also tales of reverence. In Salish traditions, Sasquatch was guardian of the woods, not to be hunted but honored. To the Himalayan Sherpas, the Yeti was not demon but keeper of sacred mountains, respected with offerings at shrines. These beings were feared because they stood beyond human control. But they were also respected, for they embodied balance. They were reminders that the forest was alive, that the mountains breathed, that man was but a guest in a larger dwelling. The wild man also reflects the fears of forgetting. As mankind built cities, cut forests, and drove deeper into wilderness, the figure of the hairy wanderer grew more shadowed, more elusive. His persistence in stories may be humanity's way of preserving the memory of what was lost, a time when man was not master but kin to the beasts, when the world was vast and filled with presences that could not be catalogued or confined. To dream of Bigfoot or Yeti is to dream of wilderness itself refusing to vanish, remaining untamed at the edge of the known. Thus the wild man is more than cryptid. He is myth, memory, warning, and yearning, all woven into one figure. He is a presence who defies the boundaries of explanation. Because he is not meant to be explained but remembered. In every culture, the lesson is the same, that something still walks beside us in the woods, unseen but near, a living echo of the first chapters of humanity's story. And so the legend of the wild man continues, carried not only in footprints upon soft earth, but in the collective soul of mankind, which longs both to conquer and to remember. His enigma is not whether he exists in flesh, but that he endures in spirit, shadow of the wilderness itself, beneath the surface of lakes, lochs, and seas, hidden in shadows where light does not reach, there has always lingered a presence both feared and revered. If the wild man was guardian of the forests, then the water beast was sovereign of the depths. To speak of the Loch Ness Monster is to touch only the surface of a far older pattern, for every culture with waters deep and dark has remembered creatures vast, serpentine, and ageless. The Celts told of water horses, each wished, that rose from lochs in shapes fair and terrible, luring the unwary into drowning embrace. Norse skalds sang of the Jormungand, the Midgard serpent, so immense it coiled around the earth itself, rising from seas to herald doom. In Babylonian tablets lies the name Tiamat, chaos serpent of primeval waters, who battled the gods at the dawn of creation. From Japan came whispers of Yumabozu, dark spirits of the ocean who rose suddenly from waves to capsize ships. In every tale the theme was constant: the deep is alive, and what stirs within it is older than men's dominion. The Highland stories of Ness, whispered by fishermen and herdsmen, were not new inventions of modern centuries. Long before cameras peered into the loch, monks chronicled visions of serpentine beasts surfacing from its black waters. In the year 565, it was told that Saint Columba confronted such a creature in the river Ness, bidding it retreat by holy word. Yet the beast was not destroyed, it merely returned to its hidden dwelling, to stir again in later centuries. Such legends did not emerge from nothing, they rose from a deeper stratum of memory, as if the waters themselves carried stories older than parchment. The loch is suited for mystery. Its waters are deep, dark with peat, swallowing light and sight. Even the keenest gaze cannot pierce its depths. And so it has always seemed a place where shadows move unseen. Those who dwell near it tell of ripples without cause, of sudden waves breaking against silent shores, of long, sinuous backs gliding for moments before vanishing again. Always there is the sense of presence, not constant, not predictable, but lingering like a secret that will not fade. The persistence of water beast legends across the globe hints at something profound. In Africa's Congo Basin, tales of Mokombembe speak of a vast creature dwelling in rivers and swamps, resembling in form the great reptiles of a vanished age. In North America, Lake Champlain holds the legend of Champ, a serpentine shape rising from the waters. In Scandinavian fjords, sailors told of sea serpents coiling through waves higher than masts. Across all lands, waters both fresh and salt bear the same memory: serpents of the deep, guardians of what lies beneath. Perhaps it is memory of creatures long extinct, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, leviathans whose bones now rest in stone, that lingers in the blood of mankind. Perhaps the tales are shaped by the primal fear of water, the unknown dwelling beneath the surface. Yet the endurance of such stories suggests something more, that humanity has always felt watched when near dark waters, as if another gaze peers upward from below. The water beast, unlike the wild man, is seldom seen as benevolent. It embodies the danger of the deep, the reminder that water, giver of life, can also claim it without mercy. To encounter the beast is to confront the vastness of what lies unseen, the weight of chaos beneath the surface. Yet even in fear there is awe. To imagine Nessie rising from the loch is to imagine touching the primeval, beholding a remnant of creation's dawn still alive in the present. The Loch Ness Monster became a symbol of this paradox in modern times, half mocked and half revered, a tourist's curiosity yet also a myth alive. But strip away the flash of cameras and the search for profit, and what remains is the ancient current, the story that the waters are not empty, that they harbor life too great, too secret to be bound by nets or reason, to the old ones, the monster was never spectacle but covenant. It was the loch itself made flesh, the reminder that waters must be respected, not mastered. Fishermen poured offerings before casting nets, whispering prayers that the beast would remain below. Children were warned not to wander too close to the shore, for the monster's coils could drag them down. Fear was teaching, awe was protection. The beast's presence kept reverence alive, ensuring that man never forgot the hidden powers of nature. Thus the legend of the Loch Ness Monster is not solitary but part of a vast web of memory. Whether serpent, horse, dragon, or leviathan, the water beast is the same voice across cultures. The deep is alive, the unseen is near, and the waters hold secrets that will never be tamed. In the long weave of human story, the figures of the wild man and the water beast endure not as curiosities of fringe belief, but as threads bound into the fabric of myth. They are echoes of the world's earliest memories, repeated in every tongue, painted on stone, whispered in ritual, recorded in sagas. To trace their forms across history is to discover a mirror of mankind itself, its fears, its reverence, its longing for the vast and the untamed. The ancients did not separate myth from memory as later ages would. To them, the world was layered, flesh interwoven with spirit, the seen braided with the unseen. When they told of hairy giants in forests or serpents in rivers, they spoke not merely of beasts but of forces, powers dwelling in wilderness and water. The wild man embodied untamed earth, primal strength, the reminder that civilization was but a thin crust over deeper roots. The water beast embodied the abyss, the unknown dwelling beneath the surface, chaos that could swallow whole the arrogance of mankind. These were not creatures to be captured or caged, but presences to be acknowledged. Across continents the parallels align with uncanny precision. In Europe, tapestries and carvings displayed wild men bearing clubs, protectors and terrors of the woods. In Asia, scrolls described ape-like giants haunting mountains, rarely glimpsed but always feared. In Africa, the rivers carried songs of serpents that coiled unseen, demanding offerings before safe passage. In the Americas, tribes carried both reverence and warning in their tales of Sasquatch and lake monsters. How could such distant peoples, divided by oceans and centuries, speak of the same beings? It is as if these figures live not in one land but in the shared memory of humankind. Perhaps they are archetypes, born from the deepest layers of human consciousness. The wild man is the shadow of what humanity once was, wanderers clothed in earth's mantle, kin to beast and tree. He stands as memory of origins, before walls and laws, before man declared dominion over earth. The water beast is the abyss itself, ancient fear of what lies beneath the dark surface, older than ships and nets, older even than language. To imagine its coils stirring below is to remember that life began in water, and that the deep remains beyond human command. The endurance of cryptid legends reveals more than curiosity, it reveals longing. For with every step mankind has taken into mastery, cutting forests, damming rivers, charting oceans, there has been an answering echo of resistance, the wild man still walking, the water beast still stirring. They endure as counterweights, reminders that not all can be conquered, not all mysteries yield to reason. Humanity may claim dominion, but in the depths of story it still kneels before what it cannot tame. In medieval bestiaries, creatures both real and imagined were recorded side by side, lion with griffin, whale with leviathan, ape with satyr. To the mind of that age, the distinction between myth and reality mattered little. What mattered was meaning. The wild man was not simply a figure in woods, He was the embodiment of wildness itself, necessary to the balance of creation. The water beast was not only a serpent, it was the warning of chaos, the abyss into which order could fall. To dismiss them as fancy is to misunderstand their place. They were truths spoken through image, not through fact, yet as centuries passed and reason grew sharper, these beings receded into shadow. Science named the species, mapped the lands, charted the seas, and in doing so declared the world known. But the cryptids endured at the edges, appearing in footprints too large, in ripples without cause, in cries across valleys, in sudden glimpses at twilight. They remain not to mock science but to remind it that mystery is not so easily extinguished. For there is power in the unseen. When a hunter finds footprints too vast for man or bear, or returns. When ripples churn across a silent loch without cause, humility is restored. These experiences are not mere errors, they are rituals of remembering. They pull humanity back from arrogance, reminding it of kinship with the unknown. Thus, the cryptids are more than legends of beasts, they are legends of balance. The wild man holds the memory of earth untamed, standing watch in forests man would clear. The water beast holds the memory of depths uncharted, stirring in waters man would command. Together they form a pair of mirrors, one of land, one of water, one of strength, one of abyss. Both guardians of mystery, and so their enigma endures. Whether flesh or spirit, fossil or dream, they remain not because they are proven but because they are needed. They carry the weight of myth across centuries, reminding every age that there is more in the world than can be measured. To tell their story is to keep alive the oldest truth, that man is not alone, that the world breathes with presence, that shadows and depths still whisper at the edges of the known. When the sails of Europe stretched across oceans and the compasses of explorers pointed toward lands unknown, the world entered an era of discovery unlike any before. Maps that had once ended in blank margins and sea monsters began to fill with coasts and rivers, mountains and forests. Yet with every step into uncharted territory, the shadows of cryptids moved as well, lingering at the edges of knowledge, refusing to vanish. The wild man was among the first to accompany explorers into the New World. Sailors arriving upon the shores of the Americas found that the tribes already spoke of great hairy beings dwelling in the forests, guardians who left enormous footprints in the mud, figures glimpsed at twilight. These were not new inventions but old memories of the Sasquatch, older than the first sails upon the horizon. Jesuit missionaries recorded the stories, noting with awe the reverence given to such beings. To dismiss them as savages' fears was easy, yet the consistency of description across tribes separated by vast distances startled even skeptical ears. In Africa, travelers brought back tales of creatures unseen by European eyes, gorillas. Once dismissed as myth themselves, called hairy men by coastal tribes. When at last specimens were brought forth, many realized that stories of cryptids sometimes held roots in truth. Yet beyond gorillas and orangutans, there were still whispers of larger, more secretive beings inhabiting mountains and jungles, too elusive for capture. The line between cryptid and reality blurred, teaching the explorers that mystery was not always falsehood. The water beast, too, traveled upon the maps of discovery. As ships crossed oceans, sailors told of leviathans rising from waves, of serpents longer than masts gliding beneath the surface, of shadows breaking seas in storm. On the charts of the 16th and 17th centuries, engravers sketched vast sea serpents coiling near coastlines, their jaws gaping, their eyes glaring. These were not drawn as decoration but as warnings, reflections of sailors' testimony. The monster of Loch Ness was only one among many, cousin to the sea serpents of Scandinavia, kin to the monsters said to dwell in American lakes, relative to the ancient dragons of Asia. The Age of Reason sought to explain, yet even as science grew, the shadows persisted. Natural philosophers catalogued whales, sharks, and squids, yet still sailors swore of creatures greater. Reports of the giant squid, long dismissed as sailors' fancy, eventually proved true when their bodies washed ashore. If such colossal beings could emerge from the abyss, why not others still unseen? Every discovery of a living giant fanned the flame of cryptid legend, keeping alive the sense that the waters still concealed what man had not yet named. Explorers moved into the Himalayas and heard again the name of the Yeti. They saw footprints pressed into snowfields, vast and solitary, leading into high passes where no man dared follow. The Sherpas told their stories with solemnity, not as fancy but as fact, and the explorers carried those tales back to Europe. In the salons of the 19th century, cryptid lore became mingled with scientific curiosity, blending myth with possibility. The wild man was no longer only medieval fancy, he was perhaps an undiscovered primate, cousin to humanity lingering in secret. The Loch Ness Monster, too, re-emerged in modern gaze during the 20th century, though its legend was far older. Photographs and films claimed to show its form, ripples stretching across the loch's black surface. Though many were doubted, the sheer allure of possibility drew seekers to the highlands. Expeditions dragged sonar through its depths, cameras lined its shores, and yet the mystery endured. The loch swallowed certainty, yielding only glimpses, never proof, keeping alive the ancient balance between fear and wonder. Thus in the age of exploration, the cryptids did not fade, they adapted. Once feared as omens, they became subjects of inquiry. Once held in reverence, they became curiosities for science. Yet in every transformation, the heart of their enigma endured, being seen but not proven, remembered but not captured, presences clinging to the edges of the known. The shrinking wilderness did not extinguish them, but rather deepened their mystery. As forests were cut and seas charted, people realized how much had already been lost, how many creatures had slipped into extinction without name. If so many beasts could vanish unseen, might not others survive unseen as well? The cryptids became emblems of hope that the world was not yet fully conquered. That mystery still breathed, so the explorers carried home not only maps of coasts and mountains but also whispers of shadows. The journals of missionaries, sailors, and traders preserved sightings of giants in forests, serpents in waters, footprints in snow. These records, half believed and half dismissed, seeded the ground for the cryptid legends of the modern age. They became bridges between the myths of the ancients and the inquiries of the present, weaving continuity across centuries. And so, in the age of exploration, the wild man and the water beast walked beside men once more. They remained unyielding, ever at the threshold of discovery, never allowing themselves to be claimed fully by science. Never fading entirely into fable. They were, and remain, guardians of mystery, shadows of memory, reminders that the world cannot be wholly mapped. As the 19th century unfolded and the Victorian age spread its mantle of invention, discovery, and restless curiosity, the world seemed to grow smaller. Railways carried men where only horses once rode, steamships cut across oceans that had once swallowed months, and telegraphs carried words swifter than birds. Yet amid this age of reason and triumph, the cryptids did not vanish, rather, they entered a new chapter, woven into both scientific speculation and public imagination. the Victorians were haunted by paradox. On one hand, they believed all mysteries were destined to yield before science, that the natural world could be catalogued like specimens in a cabinet. On the other, they longed for wonder, for proof that not all had been conquered. Cryptids became the perfect embodiment of this tension, beings that might prove the world still held secrets, creatures waiting in the uncharted corners of wilderness and deep waters. The Yeti footprints in Himalayan snows began to reach European newspapers, carried by explorers returning from distant passes. Drawings depicted vast impressions, each larger than a man's foot, striding across unbroken whiteness. The thought that a giant being might wander those frozen heights gripped the imagination of salons and scholars alike. Some proposed an unknown primate, a relic of prehistoric ages. Others whispered of spirits of the mountains clothed in flesh. Yet none could dismiss entirely what photographs and testimonies revealed. The Victorian fascination with relic species added fuel to the fire. Fossil hunters uncovered bones of enormous apes and reptiles, proving that creatures once thought myth had indeed walked the earth. The discovery of the gorilla, once dismissed as mere legend of Africa, shattered certainty. If such giants could remain hidden until the modern age, could there not also linger other forms? Gigantopithecus, revealed only by fragments of jaw and tooth, became a ghost of possibility, hinting that the lineage of the wild man might still walk unseen. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the forests of North America echoed with renewed tales of the Sasquatch. Settlers, hunters, and loggers told of hairy giants glimpsed between pines. Of cries in the night that chilled even the bravest. Newspapers carried accounts, often sensationalized, but always returning to the same image, a towering figure, more human than beast, haunting the wilderness that receded before the axe and saw. To a society watching forests fall, the Sasquatch was both fear and nostalgia, the last wild guardian refusing to yield, the waters too stirred with mystery. In 1848, sailors aboard the HMS Daedalus reported seeing a long-necked sea serpent off the coast of Africa. Their captain, respected and sober, described a creature over 60 feet in length, gliding just beneath the waves. The tail spread like fire, capturing both ridicule and awe. For centuries, sea serpents had been engraved upon maps and whispered of in harbors, but now an official report carried the weight of authority. Expeditions sought the serpent, and though it eluded capture, its shadow lingered. By the time the 20th century dawned, the Loch Ness Monster was ready to rise once more into fame. Though ancient Highland legends had long remembered the beast, it was the Victorian hunger for marvels that laid the soil for its return. When roads and cameras brought curious travelers to the loch, their eyes were primed by centuries of tales, and every ripple upon the black water became a sign of something vast below. Thus cryptids entered modernity not as fading myths, but as icons of wonder. They stood at the crossroads of science and imagination, embodying the tension between reason's hunger to explain and the heart's hunger to dream. They became subjects of lectures, sketches in magazines, curiosities in exhibitions. Yet always they remained beyond reach, seen, but not caught, spoken of, but never proven. Their mystery was their endurance. In this way, the Victorians bequeathed to the modern age a renewed fascination with the wild man and the water beast. They became not only local legends but global enigmas, woven into literature, newspapers, and the imaginations of all who longed for mystery in an age that seemed bent on stripping the world bare. For as factories rose and iron rails stretched across the land, people felt the loss of wildness keenly. The cryptids became symbols of resistance, reminders that somewhere, beyond the reach of steam and steel, the unknown still breathed. In forests and lochs, in snows and seas, shadows still moved. And in those shadows, humanity could still dream. As the 20th century unfurled, bringing with it the roaring pace of technology, 2 world wars, and the dawn of the atomic age, the world seemed smaller and yet more mysterious than ever before. Airplanes soared over continents, submarines plunged into depths, radios carried voices across oceans, and cameras captured what once slipped unseen. Yet in this century of reason and speed, the shadows of cryptids grew stronger, not weaker. It was their golden age, when the wild man and the water beast became global enigmas, whispered of not just in remote villages but across every nation's newspapers and screens. The forests of North America resounded with tales of Bigfoot, for it was in this century that the Sasquatch emerged into worldwide renown. Hunters returned from wilderness with stories of enormous tracks pressed into mud or snow, too wide for human, too deep for bear. Photographs of giant footprints circulated, plaster casts were made, and soon a new science was born, cryptozoology, the study of creatures hidden yet enduring. The wild man was no longer confined to myth or native memory, he became subject of expeditions, of documentaries, of endless speculation. The most famous moment came in 1967, when Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin filmed what appeared to be a tall, hairy figure striding across a clearing in Northern California. The footage, shaky yet haunting, showed broad shoulders, long arms, and a steady, confident gait. For some, it was proof undeniable, for others, clever deceit. Yet regardless of verdict, the film ignited the world's imagination. The wild man, now called Bigfoot, strode from the forest of legend into the full blaze of modern culture. He became the most famous cryptid of the land, the very image of mystery walking in daylight. At the same time, the waters of Loch Ness in Scotland drew the gaze of millions. In 1933, the first modern sighting had been reported, a couple driving along the loch who saw a massive, undulating creature surface and submerge. The story caught like flame. Soon cameras lined the shores, journalists crowded the highlands, and the loch became a mirror of the world's longing for the unknown. In 1934, the famous surgeon's photograph appeared, showing what looked like a long neck rising above rippling waters. For decades, it was hailed as evidence of the Loch Ness Monster's reality. Though later challenged, the image had already etched itself into global imagination, ensuring that Nessie, as she came to be called, would forever swim in both water and myth. Beyond these 2 giants, other cryptids found their moment in the 20th century. In the snows of the Himalayas, explorers returning from expeditions brought back tales of Yeti tracks, vast and solitary. In Africa, reports of a dinosaur-like beast in the Congo, Mokombembe, spread through journals and radio programs, capturing the hearts of those who longed for a living relic of the age of reptiles. In North America's Lake Champlain, Champ was glimpsed, his long neck rising above waters as had Nessie's. In every corner of the globe, cryptids stirred from shadow into spotlight. This golden age was not born of evidence alone, but of longing. After 2 devastating wars, as humanity entered an age of nuclear power and looming cold conflict, people yearned for reminders that the world was still filled with wonder. The cryptids became symbols of hope, that mystery still breathed, that not all had been conquered by machines and science. To imagine Bigfoot walking unseen through forests was to imagine that wilderness still held secrets. To dream of Nessie gliding beneath the loch was to dream that ancient marvels still stirred beneath modern skies. The media amplified this hunger. Newspapers carried sightings with breathless intrigue, radio programs debated the evidence, and later television beamed documentaries into living rooms. Cryptids became not just whispers of remote lands, but companions of the public imagination. Children clipped articles about sea serpents, families traveled to the loch to glimpse Nessie, and amateur explorers trekked into forests with cameras, convinced that mystery was within reach, yet the cryptids never yielded fully to proof. Every photograph was blurred, every footprint doubted, every film debated. Always there was just enough to ignite wonder, never enough to silence doubt. This, perhaps, was their greatest strength. For certainty would end the legend, but mystery kept it alive. The cryptids thrived in ambiguity, in the space between belief and skepticism, between science and story. In this golden age, cryptids also became cultural icons. Bigfoot appeared in advertisements, Nessie adorned souvenirs, yet beneath the playfulness lingered something older, the recognition that these beings were more than curiosities. They were symbols of endurance, of mystery resisting the iron net of modernity. Even as satellites mapped the globe, people clung to the idea that shadows still moved beyond reach. Thus the 20th century sealed the wild man and the water beast into legend anew. They were no longer confined to tribes and sagas, nor dismissed as medieval superstition. They stood at the threshold of the modern age, refusing to vanish, refusing to yield. Bigfoot strode across clearings, Nessie rippled the loch, the Yeti pressed his feet into snow, sea serpents raised their heads from waves. Together they reminded mankind that the world, no matter how charted, remained vast, alive, and untamed. The latter half of the 20th century was an age of contradiction. Rockets soared beyond the atmosphere, men set foot upon the moon, and machines pierced the ocean's darkest trenches. Humanity's reach seemed limitless, and the spirit of science triumphant. Yet at the same time, fascination with cryptids only deepened. Bigfoot and Nessie, the Yeti and their kin, were not swept aside by the flood of knowledge, rather, they became more visible, more debated, more entangled in the uneasy space between science and spectacle. As cameras multiplied and mass media expanded, cryptid sightings reached global audiences. Grainy footage, blurred photographs, plaster casts of footprints, all were circulated. Analyzed, disputed, and defended. Scientists were summoned to weigh evidence, skeptics debunked with zeal, believers defended with passion. And yet no verdict could silence the legends. Each piece of evidence, whether proven false or left unresolved, only stoked the fire. For mystery thrives not on certainty but on suggestion. Television gave cryptids new life. Documentaries showed sonar sweeps of Loch Ness, expeditions into Himalayan passes, and reenactments of Bigfoot encounters in shadowed forests. Each program blurred the line between folklore and fact, science and entertainment. Children watched with wide eyes, their imaginations stirred. Adults debated, torn between reason and wonder. Nessie became as famous as any cultural icon, her silhouette etched into souvenirs, postcards, and even official emblems of the Highlands. Bigfoot appeared in films, advertisements, and cartoons, his shaggy form transformed from terrifying giant into cultural companion. Yet behind the spectacle lingered a deeper unease. Science sought proof, demanded bones, bodies, specimens. Without these, the cryptids were dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications, a log mistaken for a serpent, a bear for a wild man, a trick of light for a long neck in water. Debunkers revealed false footprints, staged photographs, elaborate costumes. Each exposure cast shadow on the legends. And yet, strangely, the legend survived. For even when fraud was unmasked, the hunger for mystery remained unsated. People wanted to believe that something still moved beyond reach. It was not only frauds and fancies that sustained belief. Nature itself provided reminders of its hidden depths. The discovery of the coelacanth in 1938, an ancient fish thought extinct for 65 million years, shattered assumptions. If such a creature could endure unseen into modern times, why not others? In 1980, the megamouth shark was revealed to science, a species vast and strange, yet never before known. Each such revelation whispered possibility, that the unknown still lived, that cryptids might yet step from shadow. For many, the cryptids became less about literal proof and more about the endurance of wonder. They stood as symbols of resistance against a world increasingly mechanized, measured, and explained. To imagine Bigfoot striding silently through a forest was to imagine wilderness still alive. To believe Nessie swam in dark waters was to believe that ancient marvels still stirred in a modern world. The tension between science and story was not a flaw but the very heart of their power. Thus the late 20th century forged the cryptids into cultural myths of modern age. They were printed on cereal boxes, filmed in Hollywood, debated in universities, and hunted by amateurs with cameras and sonar. They were dismissed, ridiculed, defended, adored. They became everything: myth, symbol, entertainment, mystery, yet they never vanished. Their enigma lay not in their proof, but in their persistence, and as the century turned toward its end, humanity found itself asking, do these beings live in flesh, or do they live in the deeper soil of memory and myth? Perhaps both, for the line between them is not as firm as reason claims. What endures is not the answer, but the story. And the story of the wild man and the water beast continues, because mankind still longs for a world where mystery breathes. With the dawn of the 21st century, the world changed its gaze. The forest trails and misted lochs remained as they had for centuries, but the eyes that watched them multiplied 1,000-fold. Where once only witnesses with fading memory and shaky sketches carried tales of cryptids, now cameras were in every pocket, and voices carried instantly across a web that circled the globe. Bigfoot, Nessie, and their kin stepped into a new age, an age of pixels, screens, and networks where myth and rumor spread like wildfire, unbound by borders. In this new realm, the wild man and the water beast found strange immortality. No longer were they confined to villages and valleys, they became creatures of the global imagination. Online forums filled with blurry photographs of footprints, shaky videos of figures moving in forests, ripples on distant lakes. Each image, whether truth or trick, was debated endlessly by believers and skeptics, magnified into legend by the ceaseless echo of the digital hive. Cryptids were not diminished by scrutiny, they were multiplied by it, each debate breathing them into wider life. The wild man, now most often named Bigfoot, flourished in this new landscape. Thousands of reports poured from North America alone. Each footprint photographed, each howl recorded, each shadow analyzed. Amateur expeditions streamed their searches into the wilderness, inviting strangers across the world to peer into forests through flickering screens. Though proof remained elusive, the act of seeking itself became ritual. For many, Bigfoot was no longer merely a hidden giant, he was the enduring dream of mystery in a world increasingly mapped by satellites and drained of shadow. The water beast too thrived. Loch Ness remained a pilgrimage site, where tourists gazed across black waters hoping for the ripple of a long neck. Sonar sweeps, drones, and underwater cameras plumbed its depths, yet the loch remained unyielding. No bones, no carcasses, no definitive proof emerged. And yet, every unexplained image, every sonar blip, every strange wave, was shared across the internet, magnified into possibility. Nessie became not only a Highland guardian but a citizen of the digital imagination, swimming across forums, videos, and viral posts. In this digital age, the cryptids became more than creatures, they became symbols of endurance against the weight of modern certainty. In a world where satellites mapped every street, where data seemed to capture every moment, Bigfoot and Nessie whispered that some truths remained beyond measure. They became embodiments of mystery itself, living proof that even in an age of relentless exposure, shadows still existed. Science did not withdraw from the field. Genetic testing promised to resolve mysteries. Hair samples, scat, and tissue were analyzed, their DNA revealing bear, deer, elk, but never wild man. Sonar sweeps of Loch Ness revealed sturgeons, eels, and shifting thermals, but never monsters. Each null result seemed to diminish belief, yet paradoxically belief did not fade. For the hunger was not for evidence alone but for wonder. The failure of science to prove only deepened the allure, suggesting that mystery was meant to remain just out of reach. The digital age also gave birth to new cryptids, born not from ancient memory but from online imagination. Figures like the Fresno nightcrawler or the slender silhouette spread through screens, part hoax, part story, yet becoming modern folklore. They stood beside the wild man and water beast, showing that humanity's hunger for the unknown adapts with every age. Where forests and lakes once birthed legends, now the internet itself became a dark wood, spawning new shadows to haunt the imagination. Yet the ancient pair endure. Bigfoot still strides across clearings, Nessie still ripples the loch. Their images circulate endlessly, etched into memes, merchandise, documentaries, and debates. They have become both play and prayer, at once commercial icons and living myths. Children still whisper of them with awe, and pilgrims still stand by the loch, eyes straining into mist. The digital age has not slain the cryptids, it has granted them eternal breath, woven into the web of human thought that now stretches across the earth, for in the end, they are not bound by forests or waters alone. They dwell in story, in longing, in the deep truth that man, no matter how far he reaches into stars and seas, still yearns for mystery. Bigfoot and Nessie, the wild man and the water beast, remain guardians of that yearning. They remind the digital age that beneath the blaze of screens and satellites, the shadows still move, and wonder is not yet dead. As the ages converged and the legends of cryptids were carried from tribal memory into medieval manuscripts, from Victorian newspapers into 20th century screens, their endurance revealed a truth deeper than flesh. Whether they walk in forest or glide through water, whether they exist as bone or as shadow, the wild man and the water beast have never been merely creatures. They are mirrors, reflecting not only the wilderness, but humanity itself. The wild man, in his countless guises, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, Almasti, remains a figure of duality. He is kin to humanity yet apart from it, a shadow of what mankind once was. To gaze upon him is to gaze into the forgotten past, when man walked unclothed in the forests, nearer to beasts than to cities. He embodies both fear and nostalgia, fear of regression, of losing the fragile tower of civilization, nostalgia for a time when life was raw, primal, and free. Thus he is not only an external being, but an inward echo, the wildness that civilization cannot fully tame within itself. The water beast, in her many forms, Nessie, Champ, Leviathan, Naga, stands as counterpart to the wild man. Where he reflects the forgotten earthbound origins, she reflects the abyss that still waits beneath. Her long coils, her dark silhouette slipping below waves, remind humanity that it has never mastered the deep. The seas remain alien, vast, and secretive, a reminder that beneath every charted map lies another realm beyond control. She is chaos in liquid form, the unmeasured beneath the measured, the infinite mystery that sleeps just below the surface of calm water. Together, the wild man and the water beast represent the balance humanity has always wrestled with, land and water. Strength and abyss, past and unknown. They are the guardians of boundaries. The wild man dwells at the edges of forests, where the known land gives way to untamed wilderness. The water beast dwells at the surface of lakes and seas, where air yields to hidden depths. To cross into their realms is to cross into mystery itself. Civilization has tried to banish them with reason, to cage them with skepticism, yet they endure because they are not born solely of the outer world. They are born of the inner one, archetypes rising from the deepest wells of human thought. Every age needs its shadows, its figures that remind it of what lies beyond its mastery. In ancient times, they were spirits to be feared. In medieval times, they were images of sin and chaos. In modern times, they are mysteries to be debated, emblems of wonder in a world choking uncertainty. Even when fraud is exposed, when photographs are proven false, when footprints are revealed as tricks, the legend does not fade. It transforms. For the hunger behind the legend is not for proof but for possibility. Humanity does not truly seek bones or carcasses, but reminders that the world is larger than its measures. To dream of Bigfoot is to dream that wilderness still whispers. To seek Nessie is to confess that the waters may still guard secrets untold. In this way, cryptids are not failures of science but companions of spirit. They reveal the timeless need for awe, the eternal yearning for mystery. They whisper that the frontier is not dead, that beyond the light of certainty, the shadows still move. And it is in those shadows that humanity finds its reflection, fragile, curious, ever longing for something greater than itself. Thus the saga of the wild man and the water beast is not a tale of monsters. It is a tale of mankind, its fears of chaos, its reverence for wildness, its refusal to let mystery die. Whether they are real in flesh matters less than the truth they carry, that no age can live without legend, and no people can endure without wonder. They are the mirrors of the human spirit, and so long as humanity walks the earth and gazes into the waters, they will endure. As the centuries layered one upon another, the tales of the wild man and the water beast ceased to be bound by single lands or tribes. They became universal, their shapes shifting with culture, yet their essence unbroken. To speak of Bigfoot in North America was to echo the Yeti of the Himalayas, the Almasti of the Caucasus, the Orang Pendek of Sumatra. To whisper of Nessie in Scotland was to recall the dragons of Asia, the serpents of Scandinavia, the lake spirits of Africa. These beings, though scattered across continents, carried the same shadow, as if drawn from one ancient source buried deep in human memory. The wild man endured as the memory of the untamed self. Wherever civilization pressed against forest, wherever order strove to tame wilderness, the wild man appeared in story. His footprints reminded mankind of kinship with earth, of strength that does not need walls or fire. His eyes in the dark reminded man that the primal had not been wholly conquered. Hunters in Canada, herders in Mongolia, farmers in Siberia, all told of the wild man, each with names different yet truth the same. He was the guardian of the threshold between human and nature, keeping alive the memory of what man once was and might yet become. The water beast endured as the memory of the unmeasured abyss. Wherever humans dwelt by lakes and seas, wherever men peered into water and feared what lay beneath, the water beast rose. Her coils stirred in Scottish lochs, her backs broke the waves of Scandinavian fjords, her shadows wound through African rivers. She was the guardian of the threshold between surface and depth, reminding humankind that beneath calm water sleeps infinity. To see her was to feel awe, to confess that the known world floated upon an ocean of the unknown. In every age, they guarded these boundaries. When shamans chanted beside rivers, the water beast was listening. When hermits vanished into forests, the wild man walked nearby. When explorers carved maps, both figures lingered at the edges, symbols of the wilderness that refused to be charted. And when science spread, measuring and cataloging, still they remained, alive not only in body, perhaps, but in spirit, for spirit does not yield to nets or microscopes. What made them endure was not only fear but reverence. They were not holy monsters, they were also protectors. The wild man was feared for his strength, yet he was honored as kin. The water beast was dreaded for her coils, yet she was revered as guardian of sacred waters. Both revealed the double face of mystery, terror and wonder entwined. To destroy them would be to destroy mystery itself. Thus, even when mocked or doubted, they survived, because humanity could not afford to let them die. In the modern age, their power grew stranger still. They became spectacles for cameras, icons for tourism, symbols for culture. Yet beneath the parody and commerce, their ancient roots still throbbed. The wild man reminded a restless species of its wildness. The water beast reminded a forgetful species of its depths. Together they stood as emblems of what cannot be contained, mystery itself, flowing across time. Their legend endures not because bones are found or bodies revealed, but because mankind has always needed guardians of mystery. When cities rise too high, the wild man waits in the forest. When machines probe too deep, the water beast coils in the dark. They are the balancing forces, the eternal watchers, ensuring that humanity never forgets that it walks in a world larger than itself, and so, as one century folded into another, as digital voices filled the air and satellites circled the sky, still the cryptids lived, in water, in wilderness, and most of all, in the human heart. They are as eternal as the hunger for wonder, as ancient as the first gaze into forest and wave. And while men may doubt, while skeptics may scorn, still the stories flow. For legends are not slain by reason, nor silenced by ridicule. Legends endure because they are true in ways deeper than bone. As the narrative of humanity stretched toward its present age, the cryptids remained unyielding, woven into the fabric of every culture as if they were threads too ancient to be cut. Kings had risen and fallen, empires had burned and crumbled, and sciences had claimed dominion over seas and stars. Yet the wild man still strode through forests untamed, and the water beast still stirred beneath the black mirror of lakes. They seemed less like creatures awaiting discovery and more like eternal companions of mankind, shadows that walked wherever man's light reached. The wild man continued to embody the lost kinship with wilderness. When forests dwindled, he grew larger in story, as if to guard what remained. His footprints pressed not only into soil but into imagination, a reminder that man had once lived closer to the raw breath of earth. To dismiss him as fraud was to dismiss the memory of humanity's origin, to believe in him was to confess that the wild could not be wholly tamed. Thus he remained not merely a creature, but an unyielding symbol of what humanity had lost and what it secretly yearned to find again. The water beast carried the same burden upon her endless coils. As the seas filled with ships and machines probed the ocean floor, she grew ever more spectral, slipping into depths untouched by sonar. Each ripple upon Loch Ness, each shadow upon a river's surface, whispered of the abyss that will never be conquered. For man may chart the waves, but he cannot drain the mystery of the waters. The water beast is that mystery given form, an embodiment of all that lies unseen beneath the surface of things. Together they prove that legends are not bound to fossils or to flesh. They endure because humanity needs them. The wild man whispers, "Remember what you are." The water beast whispers, "Remember what you do not know." They are the two eternal truths, heritage and mystery, origin and abyss. Without them, mankind would stand upon barren ground, stripped of wonder, cut off from the roots of memory and the vastness of the unknown. Even now, in the glow of cities, in the hum of machines, in the constant flood of voices across invisible networks, the cryptids remain. Not because bones are found or carcasses dragged from water, but because the hunger for them cannot be quenched. They are the myths that breathe when science grows too certain. They are the shadows that move when reason falls silent. They are the reminder that not everything will be measured, not everything will be explained, and that this is not a flaw but a gift, for humanity cannot live on certainty alone. It must drink from the wells of wonder, lest it wither in its own iron cage of knowledge. The wild man and the water beast guard those wells. They are the eternal guardians, keeping alive the unbroken thread of mystery. And though one may ask whether they are real in flesh, the deeper truth is this: they are real in spirit, as enduring as the mountains and seas. They live because mankind cannot live without them. Thus the enigma of famous cryptids is not a question of bones or scales, but of story. They have never been solved because they are not meant to be solved. They are meant to endure, to echo across ages, to stand as shadows against the blaze of certainty. For it is only in the company of shadows that the light of wonder can shine. As the march of time pressed into the threshold of the new millennium, the question arose not only of where the cryptids had come from, but of where they were going. Would the wild man and the water beast fade into forgotten pages of folklore, swallowed by the roar of machines and the glare of satellites? Or would they endure, as they always had, shape-shifting with each age, reborn in the minds of those who dared to dream? History whispered the answer, for it had already been written in countless generations: the cryptids do not die. They are reborn with every telling, reforged with every eye that glimpses a shadow between the trees, every ripple that disturbs still waters. They are not prisoners of the past but companions of the future, carrying forward the same truths that humanity will never outgrow. The wild man, forever striding through the forests, speaks to mankind's need for balance with nature. In an age where the earth is pressed and scarred, where wilderness shrinks before iron and fire, his presence grows ever more urgent. He is the reminder that man is not separate from the wild, but born of it, bound to it, and dependent upon it. To dream of Bigfoot is to dream of reconciliation with the earth, to remember that survival rests not in dominion but in harmony. In centuries to come, his legend will remind those who walk the cities that they are still children of the soil. The water beast, forever coiling beneath the waves, speaks to mankind's humility before the unknown. As explorers descend into the deep with lights and machines, as satellites scan oceans from the skies, still the abyss remains uncharted, still the waters conceal more than they reveal. Nessie and her kin are not merely serpents of folklore, they are warnings etched in water, that mystery is infinite, that beneath every discovery lies another veil. To dream of her is to remember that the world is not conquered, that the abyss is deeper than any machine can measure. Together, these beings stand as pillars for the future. They are not obstacles to science, but guardians of balance. They teach that knowledge without humility becomes arrogance, and power without wonder becomes despair. They whisper that humanity must walk in two worlds, the world of reason, which builds and measures, and the world of legend, which nourishes the soul. Without one, mankind starves, without the other, mankind falls blind. In the centuries yet to come, when machines surpass imagination and cities climb ever higher, the cryptids will still be there, if not in flesh, then in story, if not in shadow, then in symbol. Children yet unborn will hear of Bigfoot in the forests, of Nessie in the loch, and they will dream. Some will set out to prove, others to debunk, but all will be caught in the same ancient current, the longing for mystery. For the wild man and the water beast are not simply legends, they are eternal myths. Written into the very pattern of human thought, thus their enigma is not whether they exist, but why they persist. They endure because they are needed. They are the guardians of wonder, the sentinels of mystery, the eternal reminder that mankind, no matter how far it reaches, will always stand in awe before the shadows at the edge of the light. As the epic of the cryptids neared its quiet close, the tale revealed its deepest truth, that the wild man and the water beast were never bound to a single forest or lake, nor to one age or one people. They are eternal echoes, voices that reverberate through every generation, reminding mankind that mystery is not a relic of the past but a companion of the present and a promise for the future. The wild man stands ever at the tree-line, massive and silent, watching. He does not vanish because he does not need to be seen to endure. His footprints, whether pressed in earth or imagination, remind mankind that wilderness is not a resource alone, but a living spirit that must not be forgotten. Each sighting, each cast of a footprint, each tale whispered beside a fire is less about proof and more about connection, the enduring link between human and earth, between memory and nature. The water beast glides still beneath dark waters, unseen yet unforgotten. Her coils ripple through legend, her silhouette rises in every culture that peers into lakes and seas. She is the endless abyss made flesh, the reminder that even in the brightest age, darkness remains beneath. Her tale is less about the monster itself and more about the humility it inspires, the knowledge that no matter how far man stretches, mystery always lies beyond his grasp. These beings are not answers but questions. They are the eternal inquiry, what lies beyond the map, beyond the measure, beyond the reach of light. They persist because the human heart needs questions more than answers, needs shadows more than certainties. To lose them would be to lose wonder itself, to live in a world where every mystery has been slain, and in such a world, the soul would wither. Thus the cryptids endure, not as curiosities or mistakes, but as guardians of the imagination. They walk beside humankind as long as humankind walks the earth. Each age reshapes them, each people renames them, yet their essence does not fade. They are the eternal myths, older than cities, younger than stars, forever alive because they are forever needed, and so the enigma of cryptids is not a puzzle to be solved but a song to be remembered. It is the song of man's kinship with wilderness, of man's awe before the abyss, of man's endless hunger for mystery. The wild man sings of the forest, the water beast sings of the deep, and together their voices weave the chorus of legend. A chorus that will never end. So long as mankind listens for echoes in the shadows, as the tale entered its last turning, the wild man and the water beast revealed themselves not merely as figures of folklore but as pillars of something far greater, archetypes of the eternal human condition. For what is the story of Bigfoot, of Nessie, of their countless kin across the world, if not a reflection of mankind's deepest needs? They are the shadows by which light is known, the mysteries that keep wonder alive, the guardians of humility in a world that seeks mastery. The wild man is the echo of beginnings. He walks in forests not because he must, but because he embodies what humanity once was, raw, untamed, kin to earth and beast. His shaggy form and thunderous stride are memories given flesh, reminders that civilization has not erased its roots. In every sighting, he asks humanity, do you remember what it means to belong to the wild? His presence becomes more urgent with each tree felled, each mountain scarred, for he is the conscience of wilderness, speaking in silence. The water beast is the whisper of infinity. She glides in depths not because she hides, but because she is the abyss incarnate, the unknown that will never be conquered. Her serpentine shape, half-glimpsed beneath moonlit waves, is not proof of her body but proof of her meaning, that mystery endures. Each ripple on dark water asks humanity, do you remember that not everything can be measured? She is humility given form, reminding mankind that even at the height of power, the abyss waits below. Together, they form a balance, the earth and the deep, the known past and the unknown future, the primal within and the mystery without. They endure because humanity cannot endure without them. For to walk without wonder is to walk in emptiness, and to live without memory is to live in exile from one's own beginning. Thus the legends flow unbroken, not to be resolved but to be revered. Bigfoot strides across forests eternal, Nessie stirs beneath waters eternal. They need no proof, no fossils, no carcasses. Their truth is older than science, deeper than reason, they are the guardians of mystery itself, and so the story reaches its threshold, where history becomes legend and legend becomes eternity. The wild man and the water beast do not vanish as the tale closes. They remain at the edges of vision, waiting in shadow and ripple, reminders that life is larger than the sum of its certainties. They endure because mankind endures, and as long as the heart yearns for awe, the cryptids will walk beside it, for in the end, the enigma is not theirs, it is ours. The long road of legend winds now toward its end, though the mysteries it carries shall never end. Across the ages, from the whispered fires of tribes to the illuminated screens of modernity, the figures of the wild man and the water beast have walked beside mankind. They were born not of chance alone, but of something deeper, the eternal need to remember what lies behind and what lies beyond. The wild man endures as the shadow of origins, forever reminding humankind of its kinship with the earth. He is not the intruder, but the brother long forgotten, whose voice speaks in the rustle of trees and the silence of mountains. His footprints mark not only soil but the memory of what mankind once was, untamed, enduring, and free. So long as there are forests, there will be whispers of him, for he is the guardian of that bond. The water beast endures as the abyss incarnate, forever reminding humankind of its limits before the unknown. She is not the monster, but the silence beneath the waves, the vastness hidden below calm waters. Her ripples are not threats but invitations, to stand in awe, to remember humility, to confess that knowledge is never complete. So long as there are waters, there will be legends of her, for she is the guardian of mystery itself. Together, these two are the pillars of legend, the eternal duality. The wild man says, "Remember the earth from which you came." The water beast says, "Remember the infinity you cannot conquer." Between them walks humanity, forever caught between origin and abyss, memory and wonder. And so the circle closes. The cryptids are not questions waiting for answers, but truths waiting for remembrance. Whether they stride in flesh or coil in shadow is no longer the heart of the matter. What matters is that they live within the human spirit, and as long as stories are told, they shall endure. The enigma of the cryptids is the enigma of mankind itself, a creature of reason, yet forever hungry for mystery, a being of knowledge, yet forever in need of wonder. And as the story fades into silence, one truth remains clear: Bigfoot still walks, Nessie still swims, and their legends still breathe, because humanity cannot live without them, for mystery is not an ornament of life, it is the soul of it. Thus ends the tale, yet the legend has no end. The wild man waits in the forest. The water beast stirs in the deep. And in every heart that listens for echoes in the shadows, they are alive still.